Imagine for a moment that you woke up tomorrow and everything you owned was gone. Your bank account is empty. Your house belongs to someone else. The world has stripped you bare. The question is not, what would you do? The question is, who would you become? Because wealth isn't first about money. It is about structure. It's about the architecture of your being. Responsibility is the foundation of wealth, and yet it is the very thing most people try to escape from. You will hear countless of stories of poverty and despair, all dressed in the clothing of excuses. People will tell you that the world is unfair, that opportunities were stolen from them, that their parents didn't set them up for success, that the economy is broken, or that someone else is to blame for why their life is the way it is. And while some of those things may hold truth, here's the brutal reality: excuses do not pay your bills. Excuses do not build a business. Excuses do not multiply your money. Responsibility does. The moment you decide that your life, in all its chaos and unfairness, belongs to you alone, that is the moment the path to wealth begins. Think about it. Every time you say, it can't because of this or that, you hand over your power. You make yourself a victim of circumstances you cannot control. And the problem with being a victim is simple. You wait for someone to save you, for the government to fix the system, for your boss to notice your potential, for your parents to give you a head start. You wait, and in waiting, you waste the one thing you cannot afford to lose at time. Wealth is built on action, and action is only possible when you take responsibility. Now, responsibility is not a pleasant word. It doesn't sound glamorous. It doesn't shine like the word freedom or dazzle like the word success. Responsibility is heavy. It feels like weight on your shoulders, but that weight is what strengthens you. The person who avoids responsibility avoids growth. The person who embraces responsibility, no matter how unfair the situation may be, begins to grow into the kind of individual who can handle wealth. Because wealth is not just money, it is structure, order, and responsibility multiplied. If you cannot manage responsibility in your personal life, you will not manage responsibility when money flows into your bank account. Consider this: there are people born in poverty who rise to extraordinary wealth, and there are people born into riches who squander it all and fall into poverty. What is the difference? The environment. Yes, it plays a role. But more than that, it is responsibility. The wealthy who lose their money often believe they are entitled to it, that they can live recklessly without consequence. They spend without thought, they invest without wisdom, they behave as though their wealth is indestructible. But reality is ruthless. It takes from those who do not respect it. On the other hand, the poor who rise refuse to let their conditions define them. They take responsibility for what they can control: their mindset, their habits, their effort, their ability to learn and adapt. Slowly, painfully, but surely they build. I once heard a story of a man who lost everything in a financial collapse. He was in his 40s, with a family to feed, and bankruptcy hanging over his head. He could have spent the rest of his life blaming the economy, blaming the government, blaming the unfairness of life. Instead, he chose a different path. He said to himself, "No one is coming to save me. This is mine to fix." And he began again. He worked jobs that bruised his pride. He learned skills he never thought he would need. He cut expenses down to the bone and he rebuilt. 10 years later, he was not only outed, but wealthier than before. What changed? Not the world, not the economy. He changed. He accepted responsibility. This is the challenge for you. The first step to being rich is to stop pointing fingers outward and start pointing inward. Ask yourself, where am I avoiding responsibility? Where am I blaming others? Where am I using excuses as shields to protect myself from hard truth? These are not comfortable questions. They sting, they hurt, but the answers will reveal the very places you need to grow. The truth is that every excuse you hold on to is a chain that keeps you tied to mediocrity. The moment you cut that chain with responsibility, you begin to move. Responsibility is freedom disguised as burden. It feels heavy, but it is the only thing that can lift you high enough to see the landscape of wealth ahead. Discipline is the invisible wall that separates the wealthy from the broke, the successful from the struggling. Most people imagine wealth as a stroke of luck, a brilliant business idea, or a big break that falls from the sky. But the truth is much simpler and far less exciting. Wealth is the accumulation of small, disciplined actions repeated over time. It is not built in explosions, but in bricks. Boring, consistent, carefully placed bricks. Yet in a world drowning in distraction and impulse, discipline feels like punishment. People would rather chase the thrill of the moment than build the foundation of a lifetime. The undisciplined man spends his money before he earns it. He sees a new gadget, a new car, a new luxury, and he convinces himself he deserves it now. He swipes the credit card, borrowing against a future he hasn't even built yet. And when the bills arrive, he wonders why he feels suffocated. Discipline, on the other hand, tells you wait. Earn first, spend later. Build before you consume. Delay the momentary pleasure for the deeper satisfaction of financial freedom. Discipline is not glamorous. It rarely feels good in the moment, but it is the one trait that guarantees your future will not be dictated by your impulses. Impulse is the enemy of wealth. It lures you with promises of comfort, excitement, or pleasure, but it always takes more than it gives. Think about how many fortunes are lost because people could not control themselves. Athletes who earn millions yet end up bankrupt because they spent every dollar on cars, houses, parties, and entourages. Lottery winners who gain in one day what others never earn in a lifetime, and within a few years find themselves with less than they had before. It is not money that they lacked. It was discipline. Without discipline, money is like water poured into a cracked bucket. No matter how much flows in, it always leaks out. Discipline is freedom disguised as restriction. Most people resist it because it feels like chains. Waking up early, budgeting, saving, investing consistently, saying no when everyone else is saying yes. It feels like limitation. But the paradox is that discipline is the only path to true freedom. The man who controls his spending is free from debt. The man who controls his time is free from chaos. The man who controls his habits is free from destruction. Wealth does not belong to the man who indulges, but to the man who restrains himself long enough to build something lasting. Think about how the principle of compounding works. It rewards discipline, not brilliance. If you save a small portion of your income every month and invest it wisely, time will do the heavy lifting. But most people fail because they cannot stay consistent. They want results instantly, and when they don't see overnight wealth, they give up. Discipline demands patience. It tells you that greatness is not built in days, but in decades. If you can learn to hold steady when others chase shortcuts, you will win. Not because you are smarter, but because you are more disciplined. There was once a man who lived modestly his entire life. He never earned a huge salary, never lived in a mansion, never drove luxury cars. But he saved, invested, and stayed disciplined with his money, and he died when his neighbors were shocked to discover he had amassed millions. How? Discipline. Quiet, a consistent discipline that required no applause. His wealth wasn't luck. It was self-control lived out over decades. And this is the uncomfortable truth most people don't want to hear. Wealth doesn't require brilliance. It requires discipline. And that makes it available to everyone, but only those willing to pay the price of self-control. You must ask yourself what controls you right now. Are you the master of your impulses, or are your impulses the master of you? Every time you choose impulse over discipline, you mortgage your future for the sake of the present. You sell tomorrow's freedom for today's comfort. And the cost is always greater than you realize. Wealthy people are not necessarily the most talented or the most intelligent, but they are often the most disciplined. They know how to say no, not just to others, but to themselves. The temptation will always be there to spend instead of save, to relax instead of work, to chase quick gains instead of building slowly. Discipline is the voice inside you that says, hold on, not yet. Build first, enjoy later. And though it may feel harsh, it is the only voice that leads to lasting wealth. Most people say they want to be rich, but very few are willing to study money. They dream of financial freedom, of mansions and freedom from worry, yet they walk around with ignorance about the very thing they claim to desire. And knowledge is not optional if you want wealth. Money, like any other domain, follows rules. If you do not know the rules, you will lose. And the world will not forgive you for being ignorant. It will simply take from you and hand your opportunities to someone who understands. Think about it. You spend years in school learning about abstract theories, memorizing facts that you will never use again, passing exams that have no bearing on your survival. But ask the average person how credit works, how compound interest multiplies, how inflation erodes purchasing power, how to read a balance sheet, or how to evaluate an investment, and they will stare back at you with confusion. The same people who can spend hours scrolling through meaningless entertainment refuse to dedicate a single hour to studying the system that governs their financial reality. That is why ignorance is so expensive. The price of not knowing is always greater than the cost of learning. Wealthy people are not necessarily born with privilege, but they are born with, or they cultivate a hunger for knowledge. They study money like a craft. They read books on investing. They listen to mentors. They pay attention to the patterns of markets, and they ask questions that most people avoid. They are not afraid to admit ignorance, because the only way to gain knowledge is to first admit that you lack it. The poor often avoid this step. They cover ignorance with arrogance, pretending they already know enough, pretending that money is all luck, or that the system is rigged and not worth learning. But when you adopt that mindset, you guarantee your own defeat. The truth is, knowledge multiplies money the way water multiplies seeds. A seed by itself may look insignificant, but place it in the right soil with the right water, and it grows into a tree. Money in the hands of the ignorant dies quickly, but in the hands of the knowledgeable, it grows into wealth that spans generations. This is why financial literacy is not optional. It is survival. If you do not understand how money works, you will forever be enslaved by those who do. Think about how many people have lost fortunes not because they didn't have enough money, but because they didn't understand how to manage it. They made emotional investments. You trusted the wrong people or chased trends they didn't comprehend. They believed hype instead of facts. They gambled instead of studying. And when the crash came, they lost everything. On the other hand, the knowledgeable investor, even with smaller resources, plays the long game. He studies, he observes, he understands the principles of risk and reward, and he protects his wealth because he knows how it operates. Knowledge is not just about numbers on a spreadsheet. It is also about psychology. If you don't understand human behavior, you will misunderstand markets, because markets are made of people driven by fear, greed, panic, and excitement. If you learn to see those patterns, to recognize when people are acting irrationally, you can make decisions that others cannot. That is why the richest people are often the calmest during crisis. While the ignorant panic, the knowledgeable see opportunity. There was once a janitor, a man with modest means, who quietly studied the basics of investing. He did not earn much, but he learned about compound interest and the power of consistent contributions. While others mocked him for being frugal, he invested small amounts steadily for decades. When he died, he left behind millions for charity. Not because he was lucky, not because he had high income, but because he had knowledge and he used it. Contrast that with the athlete who earns tens of millions but goes bankrupt because he never studied money. The difference is not intelligence. It is not opportunities. It is knowledge. So ask yourself, how much do you actually know about the thing you claim you want? How much time do you spend learning about money compared to how much time you spend earning it, spending it, or worrying about it? Knowledge does not come by accident. It requires intention. It requires humility. It requires the discipline to say, I don't know, but I can learn. Ignorance will always cost you more than the effort it would have taken to learn. Wealth rewards those who study it and punishes those who neglect it. Wealth is not a sprint, it is a marathon. Yet most people treat it like a lottery ticket, something they can grab quickly if only they find the right shortcut, the perfect scheme, the hidden secret that will make them rich overnight. That hunger for immediate gain, that restless desire for more without the willingness to wait, is greed, and greed is one of the greatest destroyers of wealth. Patience, on the other hand, is the guardian of prosperity. It is the force that separates the impulsive gambler from the steady builder. It is not glamorous. It does not give you fireworks, but it gives you something far more powerful, results that last. Consider the way nature works. A tree does not grow to its full height in a week. It takes years of silent growth underground before it even emerges as a sapling. Its roots must deepen before its branches can spread. In the same way, wealth requires time. You cannot expect the fruits before the roots. But greedy people cannot accept this. They want the tree without the years of growth. They want the harvest without the planting. And so they chase opportunities that promise speed, get-rich-quick schemes, high-risk ventures, gambling disguised as investing. And almost always they end up with nothing. The power of patience is best seen in compounding. Compounding is simple, but it is relentless. If you invest steadily, even in small amounts over decades, the results are staggering. But compounding punishes the impatient. If you pull your money out too soon, if you panic at the first sign of difficulty, you break the chain. Patience is what allows compounding to work its magic. Those who understand this principle build wealth slowly but surely, while those driven by greed are constantly starting over, always searching for the next big thing, never holding on long enough to see results. Greed whispers lies in your ear. It tells you that if you just hurry, if you just take bigger risks, you'll get ahead faster. But it never tells you about the countless people who lost everything because they couldn't wait. How many fortunes have vanished because someone chased the promise of doubling their money overnight? How many lives have been ruined because someone fell for the lure of shortcuts? Greed makes you blind to reality. It convinces you that rules don't apply to you, that you can beat the system, that you can outsmart time. Patience, on the other hand, tells you the truth. It reminds you that the laws of growth cannot be cheated. It teaches you to endure the slow climb so that you can stand on solid ground when you finally reach the top. Look at the stories of the world's most successful investors. They did not build their fortunes by rushing, but by waiting. Warren Buffett often says that wealth is the transfer of money from the impatient to the patient. And he is right. The impatient buy and sell constantly, chasing every new trend, while the patient hold on to their investments for years, even decades, watching them grow steadily. In the end, patience wins, not because it is exciting, but because it is consistent. Patience is not only about money, it is also about character. If you cannot wait, if you are restless and constantly seeking the next thrill, you will sabotage yourself in every area of life. You will destroy relationships, you will ruin opportunities, you will waste resources. But if you cultivate patience, you gain control over yourself. You learn to think long term, to sacrifice the immediate for the eternal, to focus on building something that will outlast your impulses. And wealth, true wealth, belongs only to those who think in decades, not in days. Imagine two people starting at the same place. One chooses greed, constantly jumping from one opportunity to another, always looking for quick wins. The other chooses patience, investing steadily, staying disciplined, refusing to be swayed by fear or greed. 10 years later, the difference between them is enormous. The impatient one is still running in circles, exhausted, often worse off than before. The patient one, though he moved slower, is miles ahead because time has rewarded his consistency. This is the reality most people refuse to accept. Wealth is built slowly. It cannot be rushed, and the more you try to rush it, the more likely you are to lose it. Patience is not weakness. It is strength in disguise. It is the ability to wait when everything in you wants to move, to hold steady when the crowd is panicking, to keep building when there is no applause. The greedy demand speed, and in their haste they fall. The patient endure, and in their endurance they rise.